As people who have been watching me might know, I love researching the ancient Americas, especially the oldest evidence of humans in North America, mostly because this is such a hot debated topic. So there are countless of theories proposed by both experts and amateurs, and only one thing is for sure. No one actually knows when humans first arrived in North America. There's evidence going back a lot further than previously thought, but is it possible that the timeline needs to be pushed back by another 100,000 years? So one of the most controversial archaeological digs in the world does deserve a video on my channel. So, as you may know, my name is Kaylee, and in this video I'm going to look into what is known as the Cerruti Mastodon site in California, which is proposed to be the location of the oldest evidence for humans in North America. By some. Some people claim this. When I say oldest, I really do mean that the site is extremely old. And when I say old, I do really mean it's at least 130,000 years old. A lot older than, the current oldest sites for human evidence. It's insane. But just because a theory about this site and its contents exists doesn't actually mean that this is definitive proof. So let's start looking into this site and what the researchers discovered and what it can tell us. I first want to take a look into what a mastodon is because, it's important. And then we're going to look into the location and the discovery of the site and what the researchers discovered exactly and the implications that this discovery might have. All aboard? Let's go. So what is a mastodon and why is it not the same as a mammoth? You might ask yourself this, you might not know the difference, or you might know the difference and be like, Kaylee, what the hell? Already know this information? But for those who don't know, a mastodon is an extinct species of elephantine mammals in the family of Mammutidae in the genus of Mammut. They inhabited North and South America, and they are for sure different from mammoths. They are not the same. The mastodons were actually shorter than the mammoths, and they were stockier built as well. The tusks of a mastodon were shorter and a lot straighter as well when compared to the tusks of the mammoths. So now that everyone knows what a mastodon is and have seen what they looked like, pictures on the screen that I showed you, it is time to look into the location and the discovery of the site. The Cerruti Mastodon site is located on State Route 54 in San Diego County in California. It was first discovered in 1992 during expansion of the highway. An excavator dug up large bone fragments during the construction of the highway. Thankfully, the California Department of Transportation requires paleontologists to be on call during constructions and expansions like this highway, just in case any fossils are discovered during the digging phase of the construction. And I think that's really good of them, Yes, have paleontologists on call. You never know when you might need one. So the paleontologist who worked at the site at the time of the discovery of the first bone fragments was Richard Cerruti, a San Diego natural history field paleontologist. You also immediately know where the name of the site comes from, He made the call to follow up on the site. He and his colleague Tom DeMere then blocked off the area and started their excavations. So they started digging down far enough where the soil was undisturbed by the heavy machines that were used during the construction of the highway. To support these emergency excavations, DeMere actually received a grant from the National Geographic Society in January of 1993. This was actually needed to continue the research at this location. Funding is very important, and receiving a grant to continue your excavations is amazing. DeMere was actually quite struck with the peculiarity of the site from the very start. This had to do with large rocks that were associated with the site that had concentrations of bone flakes around the largest stones, and the remains of the mastodon's strange arrangement. So an example that he gave was that one of the tusks was embedded vertically into the dirt, which is highly unusual. So the excavations at the site took a total of 5 months, and what they discovered were over 300 fragments of mastodon bones, 5 large stones that are proposed to have been used as hammers and anvils by Demir and Cerruti and the research team. Also, these 5 large stones are usually known as cobbles, just so you know. They also found 2 tusks, 3 molars, 2 phalanx bones, and they discovered 16 unbroken mastodon ribs and 4 unbroken vertebrae. They found the remains of a horse, a camel, a mammoth, a ground sloth, and a dire wolf at the site as well. Now you know what they found. It took a long time for this site to be dated correctly. The discovery of the site was made in 1992, but only in 2011 and 2012 was the site accurately dated. This was eventually done by uranium-thorium dating. So the researchers claimed that the 5 cobbles, or 5 large stones, were used as hammers and anvils, that the mastodon bones showed signs of intentional breakage by humans when the bones were still fresh. They claimed that humans extracted bone marrow from the mastodon limb bones and that humans used the mastodon limb bones for tool production. These are the claims made by Cerruti, Demir, and the research team. So now that you know about the claims that have been made about the Cerruti Mastodon site and how this would prove the presence of humans in North America 130,000 years ago, the claims are grand, that's for sure. And if these claims are correct, it means that the Cerruti Mastodon site is the oldest archaeological site in the Americas, pushing back the timeline of the arrival of humans by approximately 100,000 years. That's quite the timeline shift. It's incredible if it's the case. And of course, the researchers from the team understood that these are indeed bold claims that would be met with extreme skepticism and criticism. Even for them, it's not strange. They expected this. But what do these other researchers say about this site? What are their criticisms? Why are they skeptic? So first, it's good to know that the paleontologists who did not work at the site were skeptic from the start. Not because it would be impossible in their minds due to a Clovis first theory, no, but more because they saw no actual tangible proof for the presence of humans. But you might ask yourself, why did they not see the site in the same light as the researchers who did work at the Cerruti Mastodon site? How come they perceive it to be so different? Well, for starters, it cannot be ruled out that the cobbles that were discovered were altered due to natural causes. There's no direct proof for these cobbles being used as hammers or anvils, and one of the reasons that they don't see this proof that the research team did see is the lack of flakes, lithic artifacts and debris from the site. So I think that everyone who has been watching me for a while knows that when we discover a site where stone tools and bone tools were created, we see a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of lithic artifacts, flakes, and debris. It's always obvious that tools were created at a site because of these telltale signs. They leave a bunch of garbage, to just say it like that. The lack of this debris and the lithic artifacts and the flakes do strongly suggest and point to no creation of tools. Therefore, it suggests no presence of humans at the site, because they say that these stones were used for the creation of bone tools, but we don't see any evidence for that. At the site, there have been no discoveries of human bones or the evidence of human occupation. You know, for instance, the residue of a fire. We know that humans used to make fire back then, for sure. So these two pieces of evidence put together suggest that humans were never present at the site. As you can clearly hear me say, suggest. They don't rule out the plausibility of the presence of humans, but the evidence simply suggests that humans were never there at the time. Which isn't strange, because evidence will tell us everything we need to know. So in 2017, when the Suruti Mastodon site paper was released, a few months later in 2017, another paper was released, and this was created by 8 anthropologists that looked into the site and the discovered evidence by the original research team. They concluded that the extraordinary claims made by the original research team had to be met with extraordinary evidence, and that evidence is lacking, like I mentioned just now. No evidence of tool making, no evidence of human occupation, and no evidence for the actual presence of humans. No direct, clear-cut evidence. So the original research team claims that the mastodon bones had to have been broken by the hands of humans. Do note that when I say humans, I don't necessarily mean Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans, us, but that any of the living human species at that time could have been responsible. They're still human. As long as they're in the Homo genus, they're all human. So there's a former Caltrans land surveyor that had a different explanation as to why these bones might have been broken. He suggested that the heavy machinery that was working on the land to construct the highway was responsible. So these heavy earth-moving construction units could distort and compress the sediment underneath it, and therefore could have broken bones, replace the cobblestones, and therefore could be responsible for the argued man-made fractures on the bones and the placement of the cobblestones. So, the results from both the original research team and the other groups of anthropologists lead to an inconclusive result that leans more towards no human presence at the Suruti Mastodon site than it would lean to proof of human presence at the Suruti Mastodon site. But the story isn't over yet, as more research has been done and a new paper was released in 2020. This latest paper was created by Luc Bordes, Elspeth Hayes, Richard Fulliger, and Tom Demir, who was part of the original research team, might I add. Their new paper supported the original study led by the original research team that the cobbles were indeed intentionally used by a species of humans to break the mastodon bones. Their research led to new data that identified bone micro-residue on 2 cobbles. One of them is pegmatite CM254 and the other is andesite CM281. Those are the names of the 2 cobbles. So the bone residue that was discovered on these 2 cobbles were only found on the upward-facing sides, while there was no bone residue on the downward-facing sides. The downwards-facing sides also showed no wear, besides not having any bone residue, while the upwards-facing sides had bone residue and showed wear. So this suggests that the bones had only been in contact with some surfaces of the cobbles, and not the entire cobbles. So the authors of this paper therefore suggested that this is the evidence that they deemed necessary for the presence of humans at the site. That this is the bit of evidence that showed that it couldn't have been a natural cause and that humans had to have been responsible for the broken mastodon bones by using these cobbles when the site formed 130,700 years ago. They also say that the theory of the road construction being responsible for the broken bones doesn't explain the residue on the stones. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of anthropologists that are still skeptic, and they still lean towards the bones being broken due to the result of construction of the road. So unless we discover unequivocal evidence for the presence of humans here at the Suruti Mastodon site, it will remain the controversial archaeological dig that it currently is. So with a lot of unanswered questions, theories, suggestions, and, skepticism. But that's science. It's part of investigating an archaeological site as controversial as this one. And for me personally, that's the fun of researching these ancient sites and the human evolutionary timeline. And we have a baby here that wanted attention. There's so much that we still don't know, and as time goes by, we will keep uncovering more and broaden our understanding. So what do you think about this site? My personal opinion is very inconclusive. I don't necessarily see the evidence for human occupation, but I also don't want to say that it's impossible. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. If you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos, and click that bell icon if you want to be notified whenever I upload. If you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then click in the upper right corner or click one of the links in the description down below, or click a video in the end card. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to all my patrons and my channel members. You'll be seeing a lot of pictures from my travels in Egypt, and I will keep you posted on how I'm doing. The cat wants attention. I have to go now. No blabbing at the end, besides meow.